And so building affordable housing is tough, right? You got cities and all that stuff. And so sometimes those cities take the joy out of it and it kind of beats you down, but you got a purpose. And so you keep doing it. But this project is the fun project, right?
2, 3. Welcome to House Rich, the real estate show. We talk to average people that have done above average things in real estate. Today's guest is Scottie Smith II of Black Enterprise, Forbes, and now my podcast. He's purchased homes. He purchased a home at 19. He's a real estate developer. He's purchasing this. He's doing this dope project here in the Dallas area called Lake Noire, where he's building about 20 cabins. So going to get into pretty much everything. It's going to be a great interview. The sponsor for today's show is House Rich, the official brand of home ownership. Use promo code POD for a discount on merchandise. You can see it right behind me if you're watching on YouTube. So, Scott, you want to introduce yourself to the folks, and appreciate you for coming on.
What's going on, man? It's I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to the podcast. And for the people who don't know me, I'm Scottie Smith, real estate broker, investor, educator, and developer. Originally from Houston, Texas, but now reside in Dallas, where really my goal is very, very simple, and it's to help people using real estate as the vehicle to do so. And so my life's work to this point has been helping people within the real estate industry. So I started this whole journey at the age of 19. Bought my first property using scholarship money at 19, and really wanted to create myself some income in college. And I had a really cool real estate professor that challenged us, gave us a huge challenge of purchasing a house really before we ended that class. I didn't make that happen, but the next semester is when I did. And some friends from back home in Houston rented a couple rooms from me, and that covered the mortgage. And really that was the start of my real estate career, man. I recognized how easy the process was for me, but how convoluted it could get if you didn't have the right person helping you with that. And so I set out to really change the way real estate agents and realtors sold property. And so it was more so I wanted to make certain that that our people and my potential clients learn the real estate process and learn how to use real estate as a vehicle to build generational wealth.
Okay.
And so I put together classes, I put together a number of things, wrote a book, and I was actually one of the youngest brokers in the DFW at the time when I did get my real estate brokerage license. And so I think there was only one other gentleman that was younger than me. But
what age was that?
I was 21 when I became a broker.
Okay.
And so it was a pretty dynamic situation for me because before the age of 21, I bought my first rental, I did my first wholesale deal, and I was working on my very first large scale renovation flip. And so at that point, at such a young age, I realized that I was on a fast track. And I said, my goal was to become a multimillionaire in real estate before I graduated college.
Okay.
Having no idea that what was about to happen with the entire economy. And that's really when the housing crisis happened and the bottom fell out. And so but even still, man, the journey in this real estate industry for me has always been to help folks. And it was, how can I use what's going on as a catalytic path to change the trajectory of a number of people's lives? And so what I did was I still, once the market started to rebound, I still tried to make certain that folks understood that we could use this as an opportunity to buy low, build wealth and sell when the market rebounds. And so I started
Okay.
getting really creative. I did what I believe the first ever Dallas foreclosure tour, where I put home buyers and investors on a bus and said, listen, if you want a house, it's possible. Don't think of these things as your final home. Let's go in here. Let's think like an investor, and let's buy a home that may need a little bit of work, that has been foreclosed on. Let you and your family live there, build wealth, fix it up, do what you need to do. It was a very successful situation, and man, it's just, taking, like you said, average people doing above average things, and I think that is exactly the way to describe it. So.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And so I just want to jump back, because I was curious what inspires you to buy a home at 19 in the first place. You say you're trying to generate income. A lot of folks think, I'm gonna sell some t-shirts, I'm gonna make some flyers, I'm gonna be a party promoter. But like, so you actively got into a real estate class. And so what inspired you to get into that class in the first place?
So there was always the real estate bug. So my stepfather and my mother they did some things in real estate. Specifically, my stepfather was a contractor.
Okay.
And he worked a lot for the people who own the real estate. And I would look up and he would do a lot of work, and a house would be nice and pretty, and at the end of it, he's giving the keys to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, that's cool. And I used to work with him. I did roof work, ran HVAC, went under houses. I was with him during this, so I saw a lot of that process. But I'll tell you one thing: the summers of Houston and running HVAC work will really have you changing your mindset and shifting your mindset. And so, being in attics and installing AC units and running ductwork in Houston in the middle of the summer is hot. Let me tell you. And so what I wanted to find out, what I sought out, is how do I become the person who's getting the keys when the project is finished?
Okay.
And my senior year in high school, I used to spend a lot of time in the library. We had a really gorgeous librarian at my high school. So I spent a lot of time in her space. And she gave me a book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so that changed my mindset. And then when I got to college at UNT, I was like, yo, I'm gonna take this real estate class. And the teacher, Dr. John Bain, was so dynamic. The first things that he muttered to us when he got into, when he came into the class: if you don't own real estate by the end of this year or in this class, you didn't learn nothing, and I didn't teach you nothing.
Gotcha.
And that was a heavy challenge for me, right? Coming from an athletic background, I get challenged like that. I'm working to hit it. And so that's really what set things off for me, because someone challenged my thinking. Someone challenged what it was that I thought I knew. And so it was interesting, because that class was not just a real estate class. It ultimately ended up being the epitome and the realization and actualization of the things that I read in Rich Dad, Poor Dad just a year prior. And so seeing something that was in a book in real life changed my mind. And I think, there was a point in the class where he showed us and we went through his tax returns, right? And for me, that was life-changing, because that was the first time I saw someone, who made over $1 million. Okay. So I was like,
yeah, it's possible. Yeah.
This is real estate? Well, I want in on that. So that's really what happened, man. It was I read something, then I saw that something in real life, and then I wanted to figure out, how do I make that happen for my life?
Okay, thank you. And so how did you actually do that, though? Because I mean, you're 19, I'm not sure what your employment history was to that date. Like, how did you even get the money? Like how so if I'm 19, I'm 19 years old right now. I'm a 19-year-old, I'm in college right now. Like, how could I execute what you executed on?
So the lending guidelines were just a tad bit different.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
They were a tad. If you had a pulse.
Yes, that's true.
Right. If you had a pulse, you can get a loan. And so my lender was a really cool guy. I learned so much from him. I forget his name, but I just remember speaking with him so much because he drove a Porsche.
All right.
And I'm like, okay, what's going on? Teach me this, let me see what's going on. And ultimately what happened, I did have a bank job that I was working, and I was making like, at that time, maybe $15 an hour. And so that income was kind of my income that was used for the approval. Wasn't on the job very long, maybe 3 or 4 months.
Okay.
And then I still had the money from my scholarship and some leftover funds from my refund. So I used some of that as my down payment.
Okay.
And so it was a dynamic exchange, man. So somebody that's 19 right now, it's a little different because the lending requirements are a little bit more difficult. But one of the things that I tell these new graduates, right, if you have your offer letter from, when you graduate, your offer letter that's in the field that you studied, you can quite frankly get a loan.
Yeah.
Is that still the thing?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, you don't need the 2-year history if you are coming straight out of college, correct? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's what I would say. If buy a house as soon as you get out. Might as well. You're not really tied down. A lot of times people aren't tied down to a specific area. You hadn't started a real family yet. So yeah, go for it at that point.
Gotcha. Thank you. And so what was the plan when you graduated college? Like, was it to become a real, like, what was the plan when you got out of college?
Well, so before I got out of college, the Great Recession kind of hit us, right? Mm-hmm. And so for me, real estate was at the forefront, but I was trying to take the safe route, right? What's the safe route? What could give me something that, if this happens again, I would have something to fall back on. So, I got my degree in finance, and I interned with one of the big 4 public accounting firms at the time. And they had a program called the YMP program, your master plan program, where they would take non-traditional students, your finance business folks, those types of folks, and pay for them to get their master's in accounting. And so I did get essentially a full ride to the University of Notre Dame, and I got my master's in accounting thanks to this organization, thanks to this public company.
Okay.
Public accounting. And so it was I got my degree in accounting, thinking that I wanted to be an auditor.
Yeah.
And so I worked for this company for a couple of years, just kind of waiting on the market to snap back. And I realized that I absolutely hated it. Absolutely hated it. It was not my purpose. I was in a room, at some of these companies that I was auditing that was pretty much a closet.
Okay.
And counting widgets, making certain that these folks were, and I think for me, what got me really motivated is in the height of that Great Recession, I was doing an audit while everybody else was going broke.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part. I was doing an audit of this company here in North Texas that the executive bonus compensation that I was auditing was, some of the execs and the C-level executives were making 6- and 7-figure bonuses in the middle of the recession, and they didn't do anything but recycle old batteries. Uh-huh. They had a process that allowed for them to extract the lead from old batteries, put it together, and then sell it back to the battery makers. And they were making money hand over fist. And so it let me know that you can sit here and be safe all you want to, but there's somebody out here who's taking batteries and recycling lead and selling it back to battery makers and making a crazy amount of money in the middle of the recession. So you're going to be safe, or you're going to go and take a risk and hit it big. And so at that point, I talked to one of the partners and was like, I'm out, man. I'm out. I can't do this anymore.
Okay. Sorry.
No, but go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then is that when you transitioned into, like, did you have your real estate license at that time, or? Okay. Yeah. And so at that point, were you working under another, I assume you're working under another brokerage. And then how was that process? And then what inspired you to open up your own shop?
Yeah. So I was working under a friend of mine's brokerage. He was a small, it was mostly small multifamily and investment properties that we were doing.
Okay.
And I wanted to make certain that we grew the residential side. And so I wanted to make certain that we help more people get into home ownership and understand home ownership like investors understand owning. And I sent him a message. I sent him a full plan, and I said, listen, you know, we need to create the residential side of this brokerage. Is right now it was just him and I, and he was trying to grow the the multifamily side with agents. And I said, let me focus on the residential, you focus on the multifamily. And the plan was really dope. It was great. Of course, I'm a little biased, but because I put it together. But he ended up telling me, no, I don't want to have anything to do with residential real estate. And I said, okay, man, I love you. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for everything you've taught me. I've learned so much from you, but I'm going. And so that's when I started Scottie Smith and Associates. And it really was just because I got the push I needed from the broker that I was working with. Still a buddy of mine, still a friend. We're likely going to be connecting a lot this year. But yeah, it really just a push, man. That's all it was.
So how do you actually go about opening up your brokerage? You know, you have to be a realtor for a certain amount of time, get a brokerage license, and then like, how do you actually open one up? Like, is it as far as like the fees and the process?
Yeah, so at that point, you had to be licensed, an active licensee for 2 years. And so an active licensee for 2 years, and then you go and take your broker exam, pass that, and then you're a broker. Now it's a requirement that you're an active licensee for 4 years. Plus, you have to have a certain, they kind of give you this report card, so to speak, of your 4 years. You have to hit certain numbers, have done so many transactions, have an understanding. Then now there's some additional classes that brokers and licensees have to take in order to become a broker. And so as a broker, you then have the authority to hire agents on your behalf, to work on your behalf. And with that comes risk. You have to have insurance, insurance on your agents. You have to have all these things, your systems in place, your website, all of those things, stuff to help the agents be successful if you're planning on hiring agents. And so one of the things that, I tell people is, if you want to become a broker, and hire agents, really kind of look at what that expectation is of you from agents. How much training are you going to provide? What type of systems are you going to provide for your agent to ultimately be successful? And so what type of marketing are you going to provide? Those are the things that we look at. And that's what agents look at as well.
And then, so I want to jump back for a second. You were talking about when you had the previous job, looking at a home from the perspective of an investor versus like just a normal buyer. Can you talk about that perspective of an investor? Yeah,
so I wrote a book a few years back, From Decision to Close, and it's on Amazon if anybody wants to go grab that. But
well, I'll drop the link in the description for that too, so y'all can find it there.
And so in that book, I talk about the anything theory. It's a theory that I created, and it's very, very simple, not a complex theory at all. It says that you can change anything about a house except its location, right? And even now, with how they're taking houses off foundation and shipping them across America, that's, that can be changed. But when you look at what you can change on a property, which is pretty much for the most part anything, we have to consider how we look at real estate altogether when we're purchasing it. The average person is staying in their house 5 to 7 years, their first home 5 to 7 years. And so if you could find a property that is in what we consider a high growth area or the potential for high growth, and it's below market, Obviously, and at the date of this recording, it's 2022, and stuff is astronomical right now. But it'll be a correction at some point. But if you can find something in a high growth area where you can fix this thing up, similar to what an investor does, fix it up, and then just ride the wave for the 5 to 7 years that you're going to potentially be there at that property, you come out on top at the end of that, because you didn't buy something at the tippy top of the market. You didn't buy something overpriced. You didn't spend money above what it appraised for. So coming in with a mindset of, hey, how do I create value in this property, or how can I create value in this property, and then be able to capitalize on that in 5 to 7 years. So thinking about it from that perspective, right? So not just from a consumer standpoint, oh, I want the best house on the block, I want all the bells and whistles to be there, so
how do you actually identify a high growth area? Like, I'm just like I said, I'm a 21-year-old trying to find a home right out of college. How do I identify that high growth area?
So I look at a few things when I'm identifying high growth areas. When you go and look on the MLS and you see properties, there's a heavy flip market, right? And you see properties that are, really, really low in price in comparison to everything else. Some that's really, really high in price. And that specific, that sub-demographic is kind of all over the place, right? And you look at what's going on. Typically what happens is investors are coming in, buying those properties for low, then relisting them, at the market rate. And sometimes what happens is that current community doesn't realize what's going on right in front of them. And so they might list their properties, which, ultimately they end up walking away with the amount of money they want. But investors see it from a different lens. I'm like, okay, I'll buy that property for $100,000, put 45 to 50,000 into it, and sell it for 250. And so that's what's going on in some of these high growth areas. And I encourage potential buyers to look at that as well. It's like, just look at that and see what's going on.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And how do you add value to a property? You talked about adding value. Like, what are some ways that, once again, me, just a random 22, 23, 24-year-old could add value to a property?
It's simple, simple things like changing light fixtures, painting, changing the floors, right? Sometimes adding value doesn't mean knocking out a full wall, really just upgrading the things that you touch, your doorknobs, your light fixtures, your plumbing fixtures, hell, your toilet, So things like that. Don't have to think too much into it, but just things that we know will cause consumers to kind of draw to you, right? So much can be changed in a room by just changing the chandelier or changing the pendant lights, or changing the countertops.
Gotcha. Thank you. And so I know at a certain point you both started at 19, opened your brokerage 21, and then you started like developing actual like properties. Can you talk about how that why did you want to do that in the first place? Kind of start developing your own properties.
Yeah, so that actually started about 7 years ago, man. So in 2011, 2012, when things started kind of rebounding in Texas, what happened is properties were still low. And so we had a lot of, out-of-town investors coming in, similar to what we got going on right now, out-of-town buyers coming in, buying properties, all cash, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 over asking price. And so my local buyers that I, had financing, we were striking out. So that happened for, quite a long time. And so ultimately I was trying to figure out solutions. How do we create the solution for this? And it was two ways. We can go and get more listings, or we can create the inventory. And so I started, doing research, and I ended up stumbling upon this area in South Dallas where there was a bunch of vacancies, a bunch of land vacancies. And so I decided that it was going to be best for us to create the inventory. We could buy the homes, buy the lots, build on them, and sell them directly to our clients. So that's what drove us to this point. And it's like, okay, I was looking for a solution to help my clients.
Gotcha.
And then it just really spiraled out of control.
Mhm.
And it's like, wow, I really love this stuff because I'm making a difference. I'm creating a neighborhood and bringing people to a neighborhood and helping to stabilize that neighborhood. But also, I'm giving people an opportunity to purchase in an area that they would not necessarily have done. So I'm creating a vision for them and showing them, hey, this is a high growth area. Watch what happens. And that's what has happened over the past 6 or 7 years. This specific area has blown up, and some of the people who bought early on from us, who purchased, our clients who purchased from us, have seen almost $100,000 increase in their home value.
Okay.
And so that they have that equity on the table, and that's how I started getting into it. I really love the way that creative process happen. So you buy the land, design the home, build the home, and then pass the keys to somebody else was, kind of got me excited.
Okay, thank you. And I know you can probably talk about this for a long time, but maybe in a short kind of snapshot, like, so you how do you actually do it? You buy the land, you get developers, you got blueprints, like you're buying the materials, like how does that process actually work?
Yeah,
I know the average person can't just build it, or can the average person just build a house like you did?
Yeah, you just got to get the right developer or builder to work with you on that. So me as a developer, I don't do the sticks and bricks build. I hire a builder to do that, and I just create the vision. So I buy the land, I create the vision, get the financing for the vision, and then hire somebody to execute it in a builder. And so that's really how you do it. The simplest form is buy the land, say what you want to build on it, get that design, get the financing to do that, and then hire the builder to help you create it.
Okay. And so from a financing standpoint, so I know like on the lending side, there's kind of two types of financing, like interim financing, what I call just normal financing. Interim being like we have to pay the contractors every step of the way. What kind of financing are your buyers using, like, to purchase these homes?
Right. So there's a couple different ways to do it. One would be your interim construction loan, which is the way most of them do it. Or the builder or the developer, myself, will do the financing on the front end. They'll come in and purchase it just a regular purchase when it's completed. And so, or a combination of the two. So it's just really what the two agree to, the two parties agree to.
Okay, thank you. And how do you go about determining the value of the home, like setting prices and making sure, like, you're not, outpriced? You're not, how can I say this? So there's people obviously in the neighborhood whose homes are a certain value. You bring in these nicer homes, the value of the neighborhood goes up, property tax and stuff goes up as well. Like, how do you go about maintaining like affordable housing in the neighborhood and making sure the folks in the neighborhood aren't potentially negatively impacted?
Yeah, so that's a conversation that probably take a little bit more time than we got right now. But you really have to. There's a way to develop in these areas without impacting everybody else negatively in such a way. And so, depending on how you look at this, for the long-term residents who own the properties, who've been there forever and are older, I always encourage them to file all of your tax exemption, your property tax exemption, because your property taxes will stay the same if you do what's necessary.
Gotcha.
It does not matter what you build next to them. It could be $100,000 house, $150,000 or $200,000 house, which are all affordable. If the entire neighborhood has been disinvested in for so long and you build $100,000, $200,000 home next to it, doesn't matter. Those property values are going to increase. And so we're impacting the area in that way where, now you have some equity in your home. Now, from a tax perspective, there's things that we're going to have to continue to push for, which I do push for, is how do we taper the property tax increases every single year in these high growth or gentrifying areas. And that's going to come down to legislation from Austin, right? There's some mechanisms that are in place right now through, for, your older population, homestead exemptions, over 65 exemptions, disability exemptions, those types of things, that most people don't take advantage of, that they should.
Okay.
And so that's kind of a balancing act, right? And the only solution that I see is through legislation,
Gotcha.
um, because the alternative would be just leaving the area like it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Cool. And how do you define, I know it's a broad question, but how do you define like affordable housing? Like what would be your definition of affordable housing?
so I use the definition that HUD has set forth, right? And so
Okay.
looking at affordable housing as a percentage of a family's annual income, and so they like for that number to be at or around 33% of that family's annual income. If it's above that point for that specific family, then it's considered unaffordable. And so the HUD has different metrics that they look at based on household size and then AMI, right? And so there's levels to that. There's 80% of AMI, which is, or below, which is considered affordable. Then they have, your 80 to 120% of area median income. That's considered your workforce housing. And then you have stuff lower than 60% AMI. Is considered very low income housing. So
Okay.
it's a tiered structure based on a family's income. We typically bill for folks who are at 120% of AMI or below. So we capture that whole demographic.
Okay, thank you. And this may be my last question on this topic. How do you actually go about setting like a home price to begin with? Because like you're going to a brand new area where homes are older, and then you're building like these nice houses. Like how do you say, hey, this home is worth, whatever the home is worth? Like how do you figure that out?
That was difficult, I'll be honest. And so because there was nothing that was really built in the area beforehand, you have to kind of go to the closest neighborhood. So I looked at things from how an appraiser will look at it. They go, 1 to 3 months, then they go, 1 to 2 miles out. If there's nothing, you'll go, further back in time. If there's nothing there, then you go further out in radius. And so that's what I did. So I looked at, I went back 2 years and I went out about a 3-mile radius. And I was able to pull things from a neighboring neighborhood. It's like, okay, these are really the only comps. And so it was neighboring. So I was able to, bring those comps in and say, hey, look, we might not be at this price, but based on the neighboring community, we should at least be at this point. And so that's what we had to work on. And once we set that comp, it was easier for, going forward.
Okay, got you. Thank you. And so you were building basically homes in the Dallas area. And then what inspired you to say, hey, I want to go out and kind of develop my own kind of retreat community with the Lake Noire, the project you're working on now?
Yeah, so over the past, like I said, 6-7 years that we've been in development, and my team and I, we've been able to impact, quite a few families and see some things. And so I'm a hunter by nature, and I bought this property originally to hunt. And in my progression and trajectory of my development career, I took a step back and said, well, what can I do to create an income producing property that everybody can enjoy? And so with the pandemic around and all that stuff, we have pretty much, everybody's into the glamping and the camping and the tiny cabin trend. And so I wanted to create this retreat that allows for a peaceful escape for people who are into that type of thing. And so it's still development. I'm still able to build and create these tiny homes. And the proof of concept comes because I saw what folks were doing in this Broken Bow situation up in Oklahoma. So I'm like, okay, if we're an hour and a half south, could we create a concept similar? And that's where it came from. And I looked at the numbers, and it just ended up being a dynamic situation and a fun project. And so oftentimes when you kind of get into the swing of things get a little bit more serious than you really wanted them to at the beginning, right? And so building affordable housing is tough, right? You got cities and all that stuff. And so sometimes those cities take the joy out of it and it kind of beats you down, but you got a purpose. And so you keep doing it. But this project is the fun project, right? So that's where I'm like, okay, we can create something cool. We can have fun with it. So that's where it started.
Real quick, before we get too deep, can you describe like actually what the project is? Like I know what the project is as far I've I've been on the website, I've seen you post stuff, but just for the folks listening, what exactly is the project?
So the Retreat at Lake Noire is a 15-acre retreat where we're building a 3.5-acre man-made lake with 20 tiny cabins surrounding that. It's a place for people to get away, unplug, be one with nature, with your family, enjoy the lake. You can fish, you can boat, you can do all that stuff out there. And it's in Oakwood, Texas. It's about an hour and a half south of Dallas, about 2 hours north of Houston. And so it's going to be a fun project. It's going to be cool. People will be able to rent these cabins out on a nightly basis. And what we're doing is we've created a Regulation CF crowd fund that allows for people to join in as investors on this deal. And so anybody over the age of 18 can invest a minimum of $1,000 into the project and see a return, just like the big investors do on their larger projects. So this is a cool. I'm making it inclusive, bringing as many investors in, and we're raising $1 million to do that.
Okay.
So it's going to be fun, and it's going to be an opportunity for our investors to see a profit from the success of this project too long term.
Oh, okay, awesome. And so, obviously, with that, there's different challenges. Obviously, building a home within the city. Is it I don't know. Is it harder, easier? I don't know if is your land. Is it less restrictions?
Yeah.
How's that process been going right now?
Right now, it's been going great. We're doing site work at the moment, but it is less restrictive because it's in a rural area. And so you pretty much do whatever on your land in a rural area. So we already have the utilities running to the property. One thing that we have to do is do some digging for the lake. We're probably going to hit groundwater to get that filled up. And ultimately, we don't have the nonsense of a city municipality telling us what we can do, what zoning we can do, or any of that. And so it's a little bit more dynamic than having to build inside the city limits, because you got so many people to answer to.
Okay. How do you build a lake? Like, how does that work?
Man, it's an interesting process. You really just dig. You dig the shape that you want. Got to find somewhere to put all that dirt, which we'll use as pad sites for the cabins.
All right.
And then you put a dam up. You dam it up, make certain it doesn't overflow or that type of stuff. And from there, you let nature run its course to fill it up. You got water coming from the sky and water coming from the ground. So
okay, so it just has okay. And then it's the other part as far as like getting electricity to the place. How does that work? Because I assume you're in the kind of the middle of nowhere. Like, how does that work to getting power to your location?
Yeah, so we already actually have power on site.
Okay.
Encore has electricity lines running down that freeway already.
Okay.
So we're just going to run the utilities to each one of the cabins, but we're also going to have a solar component for each of the cabins. So that's kind of cool too.
Okay. And can you describe the cabins a little bit? Now you talked about like glamping. These are like because I've seen some pictures. Are they like they kind of like tent shaped, but they're like cabins, right? Like you're heating all that.
So there's two styles. We have the A-frame style modern cabin, and we have kind of a barn style modern cabin. The modern luxury is kind of what we're going for. And you build it just like you build a normal house, right? Except they're just smaller. So you got about 150 square feet on the smallest one and just under 300 square feet on the largest one.
Okay. And what's the time frame? Like, I know you're working on the crowdfunding right now, but what's kind of like the timeline you're hopeful for from like basically for your first guest to be in the cabin?
So our first guest, so we expect to be done with this by 2023. Okay. We're going to try to shoot for a before then completion, but with weather and all those things, you want to give yourself time. So 2023 is when we expect to be getting our first guest. Our fund closes April 30th. So if folks are interested in investing in the fund, April 30th will be the go-to date to look for. And then we're also doing an investor tour a couple of times a month. So the first one is February 19th. I encourage anybody that's looking to get involved with this to come on the tour and just to check it out. It's really a really cool concept that a lot of people haven't seen from ground up, from inception to ground up. And so this is going to be pretty dynamic. Pretty dynamic situation for folks.
Okay, okay, awesome. And just for once again, pretty much anything he's talking about, if it sounds like something you want to check out, it'll be in the link to either the podcast or the YouTube episode as well. So you can easily just click down there and check that out. I think that may be all I have. I mean, I really appreciate you coming on. Really appreciate your time, everything you're doing. From like I said, that's kind of like an amazing story from 19. Just hey, I'm going to buy a house with the to developing like your own community basis. That's I don't know, that's just kind of dope. My last question that I always ask guests is if you had 7 days to spend $1 million, you have to spend all $1 million on something real estate adjacent, or you lose the $1 million. What would you do with it?
So if I had $1 million, but I couldn't spend it on real estate?
No, you have 7 days to spend $1 million on something real estate related. What would you spend it on?
What would I spend it on? I probably would leverage that $1 million out to purchase land and to purchase some multi-income producing properties, not just multifamily, but anything that's income producing already. I would figure out how to have that $1 million spitting out about 12 to 15% annually, while also capitalizing on inflation that's happening. So in the property growth. So land, first thing first, I will buy land, then I will buy, income producing properties, maybe some storage units, some multifamily. That's how I'll do that.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. And I guess that was not my final question. So you talked about the multifamily property. So what are your thoughts on like the first type of property someone should buy? Some people say buy your multifamily property. Some say house hack. Some say just like you were saying, buy a property. You're going to be there 5 to 7 years, build equity. Like there's no one size fits all. But hey, average person, what type of property should they probably purchase out of the gate? Do you think?
I depending on what market you're in, I would definitely 100% go after a 1 to 4 unit property.
Okay.
HUD considers a 1 to 4 unit property as a single family property, and you can get FHA loan with 3.5% down and have you a 1 to 4 unit property. Live in one of the units, rent out the others, and do it again after that. If I had to do it all over again, I would have bought a duplex, triplex, or quadruplex.
Okay.
At that 19 years year old age. But yeah, do that. I heavily consider, depending on the market, you got to make certain that the numbers work. Some markets are a bit more expensive, so it might not work from a lender's perspective, but that would be my target. That would be my target.
And where can folks find your projects at?
Yeah, man, just you can follow me online. My main social media is Instagram. So Scottie with an IEL Smith is my IG, and then I'm also on Facebook, Scottie L Smith. So I'm there. That's where all my projects, or you can just follow me online or catch my website at scottiesmith.co.
Okay, cool. Appreciate it. And once again, that is the show. Thanks again for Scottie for coming on. And there is no outro, so this show is over. So
peace, man. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.